See, she's still up. All right. Whatever.
Okay, hold on a second.
Now
we have audio. Okay. Well, this.
All right, we know.
This is what I had a Microsoft reset. That's what that was over the last couple of days.
You can't do this. You just can't do this show anymore on the technology that we have. The technology says, we're doing you a favor by resetting everything or whatever like that. And what do? They end up screwing us all over with changing the values on everything. And then you try to do a show, you try to make people happy, and instead it's just and of course you can't do anything about it because it's an inanimate object or an inanimate technical issue. So.
Exactly. So let's start all over again. All right, since everybody.
Do I have to start all over again?
Yes, sure. We have to start all over again. So we are on live, so we could start all over again. So.
Well, I'm not going to say anything, Joe, that's not going to be allowed on the air or whatever. I mean, there's no bleeps or blops or whatever. I'm not going to say anything that's going to offend anybody. Get the Omni thing. We already did the commercial.
Well, no.
All right.
This is so that I can fix this after the show is done.
Good.
Okay.
All
so
right.
so let's.
So I'm gonna back up and say, 4 out of the last 7 days at Westchester Airport, we broke a record. We broke the record on Veterans Day of 67. Set back in 1964, it was 68 on Veterans Day Friday. I'm not sure yet. I have not had a chance to look at the records from yesterday, but I can tell you that at 3:10 a.m. here in Putnam Valley, early on Saturday morning, the temperature here, at least on my weather station, was 69 degrees at 3:10 a.m. on the 12th day of November. Now, we did have sunshine breakthrough. The temperature did drop back from 69 to 65 around 8 o'clock in the morning. Whether or not the sunshine was enough to pull the temperatures back up again and pass the Westchester record of 72 is yet to be seen. I have not had a chance to look at but all of that warmth is now gone, as you said, Joe, although nobody could hear you. But as you said, the warm weather has been replaced now by much cooler weather, which is going to be with us now for not just the next day or two, but it looks like you're hoping to see 70s again. Don't take a deep breath because you may turn blue before it finally does get back into the 70s. We've got some really chilly weather coming this way for the next few days coming up.
By the way, just to alleviate Tom Contino's concern, this is not a robe I'm wearing. All right, this is my New York Giants, scarf. New York Giants scarf, and I have my New York Giants shirt, the sweatshirt on. And by the way, while you were dealing with all the temperatures you had yesterday here in northeast Georgia, it pretty much stayed in the 50s all day. And this morning I woke up to a nice crisp low of 29. And in fact, right now it is, now that the sun seems to finally be breaking through the clouds, it has warmed up to an unbearable 35. So it's cold. And after the show, I'm going for a 5-mile walk, so this ought to be fun. So anyway, a lot different. By the way, and all the warm air, the recent warm air, is not unprecedented. We've seen this play out before. I can recall a couple of times where we've had temperatures in November that have approached or even been in the 70s, only to be followed by frozen precipitation, or just forget about that for a moment, but just cold weather, just much colder weather that lasts for a while. You can go back over the years and find, all these things and try to come up with, well, if it's like this in this month, that means that 3 months from now it's going to be this way. They're always coincident indicators. There's no rhyme or reason as to why things happen that you could connect to something down the road. current weather is the current weather. The short range and middle range is another thing, and the long range is a whole different subject. So I hope, don't try to, folks shouldn't necessarily come to conclusions just based on what's been going on in the last couple of months. We can only hope to guess it correctly as we go forward.
Well, the month of November 1989 was abnormally warm. I don't remember exactly how warm it got. I think it got close to 70. And then all of a sudden, in the final week of November, it got very cold. We had a snowstorm in time for Thanksgiving. The month of December was one of the coldest months I could ever remember, not just for December, but also for any month that we have ever had around here in a good long time. And you'd say to yourself, oh, my goodness, a Thanksgiving snowstorm, frigidly cold all through December. This is going to be one heck of a winter. And then on New Year's Eve, all of a sudden, I remember, I think it was a warm front, a thick, dense fog, temperatures rising into the 50s and 60s, abnormally mild temperatures as we greeted the new year of 1990. And January, February, and March was anything but winter-like. It was all 3 months were above normal temperature-wise, and a lot of the winter weather lovers were crying. They were saying, how could this be? It was so cold, and it looked like we were going to have a heck of a winter, and it never turned out that way. So who knows? Maybe this might be a repeat of the start of the winter of 89, 90, and maybe we'll get a whole batch of cold air, and we'll use it all up, and when we get to the start of the new year of 2023, it'll be warm, and it'll be warm for the rest of the winter. Who's to say?
So on that particular note, I'm sure the winter weather lovers are like, no, no, no. Well, we don't know what's going to happen, so let's just enjoy the ride, because I'm sure there will be twists and turns along the way. And, well, the models got it right with the idea that there was going to be some rain overnight Saturday night into early Sunday morning, and we did see some showers go by. And this is the upper trough that is swinging through, and a secondary cold front that has moved out now to the east. And looking at the satellite loop, seeing some breaks in the cloud cover beginning to develop. But it'll be one of those days, Joe, where the whatever sunshine you get will be grossly ineffective and not do much. The temperature's probably not going to be going much of anywhere today, anywhere in the eastern United States, except for central and southern Florida, because they are underneath that frontal boundary. And it's a transition over to what CPC has been saying for a while, and we've been saying for quite a while, that we're going to be running probably 5 to 10 degrees below average for this coming week. And I think we're going to probably push it into Thanksgiving week. If the European is right, early next week could be very cold in many areas.
Well, we've been seeing or saying for the last several days how the Climate Prediction Center has been projecting virtually the entire 48 contiguous United States under colder than normal conditions, particularly so over the plains and the Great Lakes, where it's close to 100% certainty in terms of probability. So it should not be surprising at all that we're looking for a long-term spell of very cold weather for much of the nation. Maybe not necessarily incredibly cold or anomalously cold here in the Northeast. I mean, we'll be below normal, but it won't be anything to compare with what the folks in the central part of the nation will be going through. But again, Joe, for those who enjoyed the last few days, the last week of balmy temperatures, it ain't happening anytime soon. We're looking for, again, some cold conditions to be with us, maybe right on through the end of November.
Yeah, I'm on that page. I'm on the same page as you. So the radar, there's still some rain going on, by the way, in Rhode Island and southeastern New England. Actually, some some heavier downpours going on there, and there's still a little bit of rain over eastern Long Island and central Connecticut that is moving east. And let's include central and eastern Massachusetts, and heading up into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine as that system pulls out to the east. And now, as we look to the west and north across the lakes, particularly in upstate New York, probably a mix of rain and snow shower activity going on here, and in western and southwestern New York, it might be more snow than anything else, and in around the Great Lakes, getting some lake effect happening in Michigan. So this is the first time that we've seen something like this in the Northeast. We've seen much of the activity going on in the West with regards to winter weather, but now that everything is has changed in terms of the upper air, the attention is going to be more focused in the East. Radar's quiet in the Southeast. We've got a few showers at midday in Florida, and the rest of the country really not showing very much. A little bit of light snow aloft in parts of the Dakotas and in Montana. Nothing much reaching the ground in the West Coast is pretty quiet. Now, let's go to WPC as we take a look at what the weather prediction folks are telling us. And this is the forecast precip for the next 3 days. Actually, I'll probably go to the next 5. I think that might make a little more sense because that'll cover everything with the system for Tuesday night and Wednesday. But we're seeing what looks like in terms of liquid melted precipitation anywhere from a half an inch to 3/4 of an inch of liquid for eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. Except for the northernmost part of that area, it's going to be rain, I think, and rain further south into Virginia and North and South Carolina, where we're seeing actually it's not out of the question that there might even be a little bit of snow popping up in some of the mountains late going in the longer range, but we'll get to that in a second. In the meantime, uh, half to 3/4 of an inch, and then 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a quarter, inch and a half plus in southern Louisiana, but dry out in the west. So you have more troughing in the east, more ridging in the west. And if we go out 7 days, which takes us into next Sunday, there's not a whole lot of difference between what the maps are telling us. And with respect to snowfall, Mr. Rayo, now this is for this system for Tuesday night and Wednesday. I'm kind of thinking that if you're north of Route 84 in Pennsylvania, in north of Route 80, maybe north of Route 84 up in New York and in northwest Connecticut, that when precip arrives, it might be cold enough for a little bit of wet snow mixed in or a wintry mix. But as far as anything accumulating, that's going to be in some pockets in upstate New York. This is where WPC has a probability. And this goes, by the way, through Wednesday morning. So you got to be a little careful because there's one more forecast period that we'll have to look at here. This is the next 12 hours after Wednesday morning, particularly for northern New England. So this is the probability for at least 2. And some of this also includes what's going on today with lake effect. But you can see this is not really all that impressive. I mean, they're talking, they've just got some areas here at about 30% in the green and a couple of blue dots of 40 and 50, a little bit higher in southwest New York and in northwest PA. Where you're seeing 50, 60, 70% or more. You also could see the bigger numbers back through Wisconsin and on up into Minnesota. Where we've got probabilities of 50% or higher for at least 2. The lower probabilities actually do extend down into Illinois, south of Chicago. Chicago saw the first flakes yesterday, and also into northwestern Indiana, and also seeing some potential for some accumulating snows in the Oklahoma Panhandle and back to southwest Kansas, southern Colorado, south central Colorado, north central New Mexico. But again, with this system coming in for Tuesday night and Wednesday, in a way, it kind of reminds me a little bit of what happened back on that November day. How many years ago is it now? You said it was 4 years ago?
2018.
My God, yeah, 2018. Time just
time and tide waits for no man, Joe.
Exactly. But I just clicked on the probability of at least 4. It sort of reminds me of it. I just don't think that, one of the things that happened in that particular situation was at the last minute, relatively last minute, we started to see clues of colder air bleeding southward from eastern Canada with a high that is up there. And yeah, there is a high up there. I just don't know whether we have the same setup to drain some of that cold air southward, because that really is what set the whole thing up. We had cold air that came in the night before, brought temperatures, and the temperatures really didn't get down that low. They got down close to the freezing mark. but the upper air was critical. And the upper air, I think the upper air this time around, at least in areas further south, is just not there, at least not from what we're seeing at the moment.
Well, as I said, I checked the FOOS tabular NAM values for, and it only goes out to 60 hours. And at 60 hours, which I believe places us at Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock Eastern time, the boundary level temperature at LaGuardia was 5 Celsius. This was at the T1, the lowest level, and in Albany it was at 1 Celsius at T1, and so that would suggest that while the mid and upper levels are certainly cold enough for the white stuff, that as it comes on down, it's going to be either as big, slushy, wet, floppy flakes, or maybe even not even flakes at all. Maybe just in some areas, just plain rain, a cold rain, maybe on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. But it will be interesting as far as actually, something sticking is concerned. Well, again, I think it's just a little bit too warm for that. Yes, I know that.
I think you have to go north of I-90. If you go north of I-90, you got a shot.
Yeah, I-90. Yeah, the further north you go, obviously you'll increase or enhance your probability of getting sticking snow. But I think it's just a little too early in the ball game, and coming off of too warm a weather pattern this past weekend, or later from yesterday, for anything significant to accumulate, even on car tops and on grassy surfaces. Of course, I may be eating my words on Wednesday, but at the moment, that's how it looks at least to this forecaster.
Yeah, I'm looking at one of the models that really did well with that particular system back 4 years ago was the NAM, and I'm just noticing here, just looking at the 12Z run of the NAM, which by Tuesday afternoon actually has some sleet in eastern West Virginia and snow in western Maryland, spreading across Pennsylvania as darker blue snow in the afternoon, uh, mostly west of 81 and north of the southernmost Pennsylvania. But then it kind of pushes up into northern PA and into upstate New York. I think really, if you go on north I-90 and northward, I think you got a shot here of getting some accumulating snows. If you're north of Route 84 and if you're north of 84, maybe you have a shot for some sleet at the start. But everybody else, I think, is just going to be, as you said, it's a cold rain. Maybe if we were just looking at the magnitude of the cold air that we're dealing with here, if we were perhaps 2 weeks down the road, we might be having a different conversation. Maybe everything would be colder further south, but I just don't think we're there yet. And of course, just getting there, we should mention too that we do see some of the snow that's being produced by the model in Oklahoma and into Missouri and Illinois. Chicago looks to get some. And then you get that area just kind of goes one way, separates, and then you get the area with the low, which crosses the Florida Panhandle, and then just jumps up into southeastern Virginia and is just offshore Long Island by the time we get to Wednesday morning. After that goes by, I think the rest of the week probably looks fairly quiet.
I think so too. And in fact, I was looking at the upper air at the 500 level, and while it does indeed turn sharply into the northwest and brings in that much colder airflow for tonight into early tomorrow, and you say to yourself, "Oh, wow! Now the real cold air is here." It ain't here to stay, because the almost just as quickly that upper flow flattens out and becomes more zonal out of the west for later tomorrow into Tuesday. And it's still a chilly airflow. No question about that. It's a chilly airflow compared to what we've been dealt over recent days, but it flattens back out to a more westerly flow. And as a result, we may even begin to warm up some again later on in the week. So, and it is a quiet pattern. After we get through whatever comes our way for Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, after that, it looks like tranquility returns, and it looks like we may be in for some nice weather for this upcoming last weekend before Thanksgiving. And I can hardly believe that we're less than 2 weeks away from Turkey Day, but things are really moving along this month of November, Joe.
Yeah, I'm gonna disagree with you slightly on after this low goes by. I don't think it's not gonna warm up. Uh, it's not gonna it's the low goes by. You've got some pretty chilly thicknesses that are spread out from the northeast and mid-Atlantic states. The 540 gets all the way down on Thursday night. The 540s to me, okay, and you've got a 522 thickness almost to you. So we're not going to get the coldest air is going to be back up into the Dakotas and Minnesota, but if you it I think it's just going to I think it's going to be mostly 5 to 10 degrees below average pretty much all week long. It won't get colder than what it is now though. I probably maybe about as cold
I
as
think
it is now.
I think the worst of the cold is going to be tonight and into early tomorrow. And again, I think after that, there will be some moderation. Again, I'm not talking about temperatures jumping back to the 60s or even the 50s, but it will be a little bit milder, a little bit easier to take later in the week as opposed to what we'll be experiencing early this week. Again, because the winds, the upper level winds, will be more out of a northwest direction. And that westerly airflow, that westerly component aloft, should allow for a little bit of warming as we move toward the latter part of the week.
Okay,
But,
so
nothing.
I got the upper air up for the second half of the week. It's I don't know. It's kind of cold looking to me.
Yeah, well, but as I said, it's more like a zonal flow. Yeah, all right. So there's a bump later on in the week. I think after that Wednesday system goes by, the winds go back to a more west-northwest direction aloft or whatever. But yeah, well, let's agree on this. The bottom line of it is that the first 11 days of November were abnormally mild, and that the next couple of weeks are going to be anything but that. And the worst of it, the more frigid air will remain over the plain states and western Great Lakes. But we'll be chilly too.
So I mentioned the European earlier, which I have up now on the screen because the GFS is not showing. The GFS was, if you looked at the models the last couple of days, GFS was trying to bring something up for the end of the week. Now and the other models did not have that, and it's pretty much gone. And as the flow that Joe describes is not going to really be favorable to bring another system up at the end of the week. However, as we go through the weekend, and the European really kind of spreads out the colder flow from Canada, it drops a deep upper low down from Lake Winnipeg into the Great Lakes for Sunday into Monday of next week, and that swings eastward. That I think is going to be the catalyst for maybe another system to develop on next weekend. Maybe a week from today, we'll be talking about this, and that will bring in, I think, what could be a fairly ample shot of cold air for the start of Thanksgiving week, from what I'm seeing. And interestingly enough, I'm going to go to I'm going to put pivotal weather up. I looked at this today. So I've got the Europeans snow forecast map. Oh my God, we're starting to use them. And this is the 24-hour snowfall from the first system. And you could see even in places up to the north, it really isn't producing very much because it's just not going to be a big deal. Now this is the 24-hour snowfall, so it also the last frame on this is Wednesday afternoon. So if we move it along, it does get more significant for Vermont, for New Hampshire, especially central and northern New Hampshire, central and northern Vermont, where you've got some 6-inch plus snowfalls, and into Maine. So that sort of makes sense. And you can see also it's got snow extending down into the mountains of West Virginia out of all of this. Now, nothing much happens after that, but with the next system, where we may have a little more cold air leading into it, this is where you start to see something a little bit more significant in terms of snowfall for the Northeast. And I've just kind of locked it in on this is again the 24-hour snowfall. This is ending Monday afternoon. And if we do get a system that develops over the weekend, this actually brings some measurable snow, Joe, down into a small portion of northwest New Jersey, along and north of Route 84. That's where you start to get into the 1 inch plus amounts. Also, interior Connecticut, up the Hudson Valley to upstate New York, some bigger amounts around the lake, some bigger amounts around Vermont. And again, it's a little hard to look when you look at these 24-hour snowfall maps, but if you look at the peak on here, this would be going into Monday evening, some 6 inch and even 10 inch plus amounts showing up in parts of central and northern New England. Well, mostly northern New England. But that to me looks like it could be, that system, if it materializes the way the European describes, and it probably won't. It would probably change some. I think that one probably has more cold air to play with, and we could see something more significant in the interior Northeast.
I'm surprised that the I presume it's the hand-drawn probability, snowfall probability. They have tomorrow morning, or by tomorrow morning, obviously lake effect in the vicinity of Buffalo, but they hardly have anything else on day one, which runs through 12Z tomorrow morning, and then for 12Z Monday to 12Z Tuesday, and from 12Z Tuesday to 12Z Wednesday, nothing at all really across the Northeast. It's the only thing of significance is down near Buffalo, and also, as you pointed out, Joe, by 12Z tomorrow morning, again on the hand drawn. Again, it's not. It may be hand drawn. I'm not sure anymore what they're doing over at WPC, but I think, or I believe that they're showing the probability, a low probability of 4 inches up, let's say near the Vermont Quebec border. But that's the only thing they've got from now till tomorrow morning. For the rest of Monday into Tuesday into even early Wednesday, not much at all. I know you're looking at the computer-generated probabilities, but I'm talking about the other map that shows in colors of green and blue and red, the 10 and 40 and 70% probabilities. And again, not all that much to write home about.
But they're showing probability of at least 4 on the hand-drawn map, correct?
Let's see. I got to go back to it. I got out of it, and then, but I can quickly get back to it. Hang on for a second. For probability for at least 4 inches valid from 12Z Sunday to 12Z Monday, they have that little bit of 10 to 40% for 4 inches down in the vicinity of Buffalo, southwest
New York. Yeah, that's the map I showed. It matches up with the computer map, because the computer map had that, and then it had not much else. It's got a small little dot somewhere north of Binghamton, where it has a 10% or greater probability of at least 4, and then the rest of it is up in northern Maine. Yeah, no, it matches up, because I was showing the 2. So the probability of 2 was a little bit more, but not that. But honestly, not that much greater. Okay. Yeah. The European, by the way, I've got the European surface up just to show you what it does with that deep trough coming down out of Canada. You have a low dropping into Minnesota. You have at the same time a low that develops along the Texas coast in the Gulf states, crosses North Florida, off the Carolinas, and goes up just east of 40 and 70. It's got a deepening low in somewhere in the 980s that moves east, and the low in the lakes disappears. It's mostly there's a little semblance of it left over, but there is a little there's a 1034-ish high ahead of this, Joe, next Sunday morning, sitting in southern Vermont, New Hampshire, as the low comes up. Now, remember, the map I'm showing here does not show precip type. This is all just liquid precip. So just because it shows all green doesn't mean it's all rain. In fact, I looked at it on Pivotal, and actually much of what you see in New York State and Vermont, New Hampshire, and even down into Connecticut is snow. So let's watch and see how this might be something of interest. And then, as I said, the very cold behind this one. This one gets the thicknesses down almost to 510 in New York State, 516 to Long Island and southeast Pennsylvania. So it's a fairly decent shot of cold air, what I would probably describe as certainly Canadian cold air that comes in for the beginning of Thanksgiving week, and it would at least suggest that the temperatures are going to be pretty cold going into Wednesday. of Thanksgiving week. So winter weather lovers, start paying attention. Things are going to happen. We just have to see how they all play out in the coming couple of weeks. And the other thing I just noticed, by the way, lost that. Let me get that back. The other thing I did notice, Joe, at least from the overnight, it's kind of weird. Been pulling up these runs of the polar vortex in the stratosphere, and it's been showing this where the in between runs keep wanting to split the polar vortex, and then the main runs have not really tried to split the polar vortex. But last night was interesting because on the 0Z run, and this now comes down about 9 days from now, 8 or 9 days from now. I'm just going to run it back. The polar vortex is stretched out at the moment, with a center near Siberia and then a trough that's kind of swinging up over Greenland. Well, as we go through the next 10 days, we have a definitive split that develops here, with one center dropping down into almost into northern Hudson Bay, and the other one staying back over Siberia. But the primary vortex is moving into North America, which is kind of very interesting. And it actually, on that overnight run, not the in-between run, but the overnight run, it stays split for quite a while before the southern vortex takes over. But then it resplits again. So it's just really that if you're a winter weather lover and you're seeing this, at least from sort of a bare bones data set here, and you're seeing this tendency for the model to keep splitting that polar vortex that way, you have to I would be encouraged for winter weather lovers if we continue to see the polar vortex kind of stretch back and forth and split at times, because that usually portends some sort of it certainly portends a colder pattern of a colder flow of air coming into the United States. Exactly where depends on where the trough's set up, but it does favor colder air coming into the United States, particularly more toward the east than, say, toward the west, the way this is lined up. And sometimes it could also be a forerunner of an indicator of maybe getting a blocky pattern developing in the Atlantic, which, that's more transitory. But certainly, from the standpoint of getting cold, you've got the setup you want to. You're going into it with the setup you'd like to see. So we'll just sort of leave it at that at this point. And I'm going to come back. We're going to come back full screen now.
It's odd because on the 3 to 4 week prog by the Climate Prediction Center, they actually have above normal for much of our area. I'm going to just check it out one more time. I got a brief glimpse, and let me underscore the word brief glimpse of this. Yeah, Joe, in fact, if you want me to share this, I'll just bring it up if you want to let me show everybody.
Yeah, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Now that was probably, was that done Friday?
I presume so.
Yeah. Now late last week, we had the models kind of doing what they always like to do, which is halfway through a pattern, they start showing it going the other way, and then it goes back to the original one for a while. So they might have been reacting to some of the runs from later last week, which showed a maybe that this whole thing sort of pulling out a bit. Now to overnight, it just kind of went back the other way. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, this shows the Climate Prediction Center, the experimental 3 to 4 week temperature outlook, and it was valid, or it was issued on November 11th, Veterans Day, this past Friday, and it is valid for November 26th through December the 9th. And as you can see, I would have to say 2/3 of the country in above normal probability for temperatures above normal. We here in the Northeast are in that time frame. Now, Thanksgiving is November 24th, so this takes this begins on the Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend and carries over into the 9th day of December. And this forecast is suggesting that more often than not, over that 3 to 4 week interval from the 26th of November to the 9th of December, we will be seeing above normal temperatures. The only place, in fact, where they show below normal is a slice of Montana and North Dakota in the northern plains, and everywhere else, equal chances of either above or below normal probability in terms of temperature. Now, if you're saying to yourself, well, what does the precipitation look like? Precipitation looks, well, if you're hoping for a lot of precip, there's a paucity of precipitation over much of the southeastern United States, northern and central Florida, for example, and then to the Carolinas. Also, a below normal stripe across portions of Texas and Oklahoma and into much of uh, Missouri and Kansas and a sliver of Nebraska and southern Iowa. The only place that has above normal precip is over in the Pacific Northwest, particularly over Washington State. But everywhere else, equal chances, and that includes our area. So if you were to take this at face value, then consider this: the last few days of November and into the early half of December, presumably, if this is correct, will be milder than normal with a 50-50 chance of either precipitation that will come down frequently or infrequently. It does not look like a pattern that jumps out at you. And I know, Joe, we've been talking about how, through the rest of the month, it looks quite cold, but somehow or other, the people over at the Climate Prediction Center believe that once we get toward the final few days of November, we're going to break out of that pattern and back into a mild pattern, taking us into early December. But we shall see.
Yeah.
We shall see.
I'm just I was just quickly looking at the new GFS. Hang on, let me bring myself back into this. To see if it was going to go along with what the European has for late next week. See, the GFS got a totally different view of things. And I think part of the reason is, once again, and this is something that we have to look for, Joe, once again, the GFS seems to be developing some kind of tropical system in the Southwest Caribbean. And if that's the case, and even something in the Southwest Gulf, not that it blows up anything of consequence, but it does have some kind of low in the Bay of Campeche sometime late next week and early next week, and that would favor more of a ridge in the southeast U.S. and across the Gulf states, if that's real. The European doesn't have this, so the one thing that could alter what's going on in terms of the longer range is if we wind up once again getting some sort of tropical cyclone formation that alters the pattern across the southern United States and alters the pattern off the southeast coast of the U.S. That I think is something you need to pay attention to. The GFS does not drop that big trough down into the Great Lakes at the beginning of Thanksgiving week. In fact, it's nowhere to be found, and it would suggest that even Thanksgiving week would turn out to be more of a seasonal to maybe even slightly milder than normal, slightly warmer than normal temperature pattern for Thanksgiving week. So the two models are at odds here, and I think it has to do with the potential that the GFS wants to show some tropical activity and the European does not. If we want to just see if there's a tiebreaker here, it's probably too early for the Canadian. No, the Canadian is in. And the Canadian is just taking a look here. And the Canadian does have a trough, not as deep as the European, but it does have a trough swinging into the Great Lakes and Northeast for the beginning of Thanksgiving week before it flattens out around Thanksgiving Day. And I just want to see what it does with any kind of low. Yeah, it has mostly a flatter looking pattern, so you get something that comes out of the eastern Gulf and moves off the southeast coast and never really comes up to be a problem in the Northeast. So, as usual, it's a puzzle that we're not going to solve on this show, at least not today. So, right?
Tom Contino was asking about the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation. And to tell you the truth, Tom, I've been so busy the last few days. Joe is aware of this, and I've made mention of it here on the chat board, that yesterday we had a big honeymooners tribute at my wife's German-American club. We actually had Brian Carney, who's Art Carney's son, and he brought along with him, Joe. I'm going to post these on Facebook when I get a chance over the next day or two. He brought along his father's one of his father's seven Emmy awards, his Golden Globe award, his Oscar. Let me tell you, those of you who watch the Oscars on television, that trophy is a heavy duty trophy. I must have weighed at least 14 or 16 pounds. It was really heavy lifting to lift that up. But he brought that. But more importantly, Joe, he brought the hat that Norton, Art Carney, wore as Norton all through the various incarnations of the Honeymooners. And he allowed anyone and everyone to wear the hat. And I know a friend of mine who's in the room right now with me, Sam Storch, who's also a big Honeymooners fan. I mean, we had chills just wearing that hat.
Oh, I'm sure.
And then we had a guy who was able to bring down. He had gotten this from a Sotheby's auction. He got one of the original bus driver uniforms that Ralph or Jackie Gleason wore on the show. Plus, and anytime you watch now the Honeymooners on Channel 11 or on MeTV, in the Honeymooners kitchen, there's the sink. He brought the sink with him. We actually had the sink in our German American Clubhouse tribute last night, and we had over 100 people, and everybody was having a ball, and it took a lot of hard work to get it all together. So I have not had a chance over the last few days to really concentrate so much on weather and on the MJO as Tom wanted. But in the overview of things, what else can I tell you except, Tom, it's not going to be as warm as it's been over the last 2 weeks. Colder weather is here. We'll see what happens on Tuesday night, Wednesday with that next system and whether or not it can bring any kind of frozen precip into any part of the tri-state area. And then after that, maybe not quite as cold as what we're going to see over the next couple of days, but colder certainly than what we've had over the last couple of weeks. And based upon what the folks over at the Climate Prediction Center say, and they, of course, are paid to look at the long-range outlooks.
Oh, they don't do it for free like we do?
Oh, I don't think. No, they're not like us. That they specialize in long range, and they're saying that the worm will turn again at the end of the month. Although, Joe, you bring up a good point. I mean, if we get another tropical system, that could very well again upset the overall weather pattern for later on in the month. We'll see. Although, how many times do we get significant tropical systems like the ones we just had that changes everything more than once in a specific season? It doesn't happen very often.
No, but the fact that we've had such disruption leads me to want to remember the trend is always your friend. So I mean, eventually you have to have the last one. This is not going to be going on forever. One of these has to be the last one. You would hope. Right. I mean, you would hope that Nicole was the last one, but you know what? Not impossible. The way this very strange hurricane season has been. Shraggy Stern is back. He's been gone since the winter time, but he comes back in the winter. He hit the super tap tip jar, and he reflects, Joe, the sentiment that most winter level snow weenies feel at this time of the year, at this time of the month of November. He says, "Welcome to winter 2022. Can I already give up?"
Yeah. Happens every year in November, right? You're ready to throw in the towel. And thanks also to the chairman, who also hit Super Chat, and he says, when it will snow, we don't know, but we do have the two best meteorologists who will tell us when it will. Who are those two people, Joe?
I know.
I don't know either.
I can't possibly imagine. Maybe we'll have them on the show as guests.
Yeah. I did, by the way, I did ask a mutual friend of ours, Chris Cimino, if he could come on and come on Joe and Joe. And I know that those of you who are not aware, Chris now works the morning shift. I guess he gets up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go on at 4 a.m. and on Pix 11 to do the weather there. And then he also has a talk show, believe it or not, at 10 o'clock in the morning with I don't know who the co-host is, but I said to Chris that if he does say that he wants to come on, obviously I wouldn't ask him to come on when he has to get up, real early in the morning, but he doesn't have to get up on Saturday morning. So maybe we can arrange to have a special Joe and Joe just for Chris on a Friday night sometime down the road. But he hasn't gotten back to me yet, so we'll see.
We do have a weekend show fee.
A weekend show fee, yeah.
Just among all the other fees that we charge. All right, well that's good to know. Let's do Briller Jeopardy as we wrap up the slowly begin to wrap up the show. And today's question, Joe, is what 5 mountain ranges in the U.S. record the most average snowfall yearly? 5, and all 5 mountain ranges have a ski resort. Okay, so so let's begin, and of course,
in the United States. In the United States, obviously, we're not talking about the one in Tibet.
Yeah, no, these are U.S. Anyhow,
I would think that one of them would have to be, well, yeah, we just talked about it a few days ago because they got a really significant snowfall in California in the Sierra Nevadas.
Right,
area.
Which Jason Schaefer came as the first guest, and so did Bob B. Livingsworth. That is on the list, and Tom Contino hit the next one on the list, which is the Cascades.
Right.
And Louis Orizio mentions the Wasatch, and those 3 quickly have been knocked off. They are 3 of the 5 mountains. The Cascades, Joe, between 425 and 625 inches. And they're number 2, by the way. Number 3 is the Wasatch in Utah, up to 550 inches, and number 5 is the Sierras in California, 400 to 500 inches. So that leaves 2 that have not been mentioned. And
are they all west of the Mississippi? Can I ask that question?
Yes, all of them. None of them are in the east. They are all in the west. Where all cold fronts approach from the west. So there's 2 left. 2 left.
Well, it'd have to be somewhere in the Rockies, although I don't know specific mountain ranges in the Rockies per se. Maybe there's one, let's say, in Utah, because Utah always has on their license plate the greatest snow on earth. So my assumption would be that mountain range that goes through Utah, which is in the Rocky Mountain Range, might be one of them. Although I don't specifically know the name of that range or ranges.
It is, well, I will say that this mountain range is part of the Rocky Mountains, and it extends for approximately 40 miles in a north-south direction. One of the peak is, here's a hint, the peak is considered grand.
The peak is considered grand.
Yes.
The Grand Tetons?
Yes, the Grand Tetons.
Yes.
1E by Craig Carlberg. 1E on the Tetons. Now, the one remaining, and is number 1 on the list, is...
I think it was mentioned, Sam. So my friend Sam was sitting and watching the show. He said Wasatch, but we already mentioned that, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. So
yes.
We've got the Cascades, the Wasatch, the Tetons, the Sierras. Now this one, I'm going to just tell you, is in Alaska. So this is one I don't know that anyone's going to get this because I frankly have not heard of this, but this particular range. So I don't know if you want to take a stab at this.
Where's our friend up in northern Alaska? He's not on today.
They're not here.
No.
The Alaska folks would get this, but they're not on the board tonight. So this morning. So with that in mind, since Denali says Rich Rothmansky, I don't exactly know if Denali's in this, or Miss Fowlerite says the Brooks Range. He says the Alaskan Mountain Range. Let me just quickly.
I'm cheating here. I brought up mountain ranges, Alaska, Denali, Mount Blackburn, Mount Wrangell, Mount Foraker, Mount Borna, Mount Marcus Baker, Mount St. Elias, Mount Fairweather, Mount Deborah, and there are 42 more. But don't ask me to ask.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so I'm just going to give everybody the answer. It's actually I got it from the Anchorage Anchorage.net, which is the Visit Anchorage, Alaska website, and they're called the Chugach Mountains.
Oh, the Chugach, of course.
Yes, they are Alaska's most accessible natural area. Um, they create the skyline around Anchorage.
Well, we went when Renata and I were in Anchorage 3 years ago, 4 years ago. No, actually 7 years ago. My God, the time flies. We went north of Anchorage with a friend of ours and saw these beautiful mountain ranges and snow, and actually stopped, I think, at a ski center. So who knows? This might have been the one that we had stopped at.
Well, it says here on the website, Joe. It says that Chugach State Park is one of the largest state parks in the nation. To the east of that, Chugach National Forest is the second largest national forest in the U.S. Together, they comprise more than 9,000 square miles of hiking, rafting, biking, ATVing, kayaking, and fishing. The most frequently climbed mountain in Alaska, the most popular trailheads, and more than 60 of the state's most accessible glaciers are all found in the Chugach. Chugach. CHU. I put the link up on the chat board for those of you who might be interested in in that. So anyway, on that note, as we come up on to the noon hour, and Izzy D hitting Izzy D hitting super chat. He says, "Guess what U.S. state my profile pic is in?"
No, we'd have to enlarge the profile picture to see that.
Yeah. I can't see. I could kind of make it out. I don't know. I can't enlarge it. So you'd have to tell us, please, what state is it in? And it's not New Jersey. I'm guessing, Jason, it's not New Jersey. Craig Carlberg says it looks like Colorado. It starts with the C, so that's Colorado, right? Are there any other states or California? Those are the only two states that start with the letter C?
To my knowledge, yeah.
Okay.
Or
Connecticut.
Right. Connecticut? Connecticut.
The answer is Craig. Craig is it's Colorado. Okay. And on that note, let's call an end to today's show. I want to watch some football. I got to go take a 5-mile walk with the dog because he was patiently waiting for me to do that. And
I guess we'll see everybody tomorrow at 7:35.
7:35 tomorrow night, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.